For being with us. You're with the news here on Mataram. My name is Apurva Sridhar. Let's begin with our top focus story coming in at this hour. Amid the tension that is brewing between India and China at the border, we're looking at fresh developments coming in. Prime Minister Modi is currently in Ladakh, taking stock of the situation along the line of actual control. He is in fact accompanied by the Chief of Defence Staff General Bipin Rawat and the Army Chief General Naravane. Prime Minister interacted with the personnel of the Army, Air Force and the ITBP while he visited one of the forward locations.
We've already got those visuals coming in where the Prime Minister is interacting with the ITBP personnel, and especially given the fact that those are the men who continuously ensure and safeguard our territories. But what's of importance here is the fact that right now, after his visit there, he would be then going ahead and possibly going to the hospital as well. But I'll just like to show you certain aircraft which are constantly landing, and possibly that is of the Prime Minister. He's back in Leh at this particular point, and the importance of this entire meet that took place at the Nimu was very clear. That he wanted to check for himself as to what exactly is the condition on the ground, what are the kind of situation which are currently taking place, what is the extent to which the Chinese had in fact intruded, and how exactly are the Indian troops standing up to them. And right now, what we can tell you that he's back in Leh at this particular point. He would be going ahead and meeting with the 14 Corps. He would be going at the 14 Corps base, wherein he would also be meeting with the injured soldiers. The entire visit of the Prime Minister was also completely under a blanket. There was no information regarding this. It was a very tight-lipped visit, which which is still continuously going on. But what we can tell you right now is the fact that the Prime Minister would be visiting would be commemorating the fallen heroes, but at the same time, he will be paying homage to them, and at the same time he would also be going to the hospital to meet the injured soldiers. Remember, there were several of our soldiers who had been injured, and right now the whole attempt by the Prime Minister to go on the forward base, we've seen how he has already gone there to Nimu, where he had in fact met several of our soldiers who have been at the front line, who have in fact been the ones who are really guarding our borders, trying to ensure that none of the enemies of the Indian state can enter through. But at the same time, this was a clear-cut message to the Chinese as well, that the Indian Prime Minister is very well capable of reaching the forward post within an hour, and that is something that is worth mentioning here. The Prime Minister has shown to the world that we will not let our troops down in any way, and if at all our enemies continue to enter or try to infiltrate the country, we will not let that happen as well. We will not succumb to any sort of a pressure, and that's exactly the point which has been made very well by the Prime Minister here.
Let me go across to our managing editor, Vinay Tiwari, who's joining us on the broadcast. Vinay, good afternoon. We're, of course, looking at developments that are coming in, and these are very significant at a time we're looking at the border tension that is still there. But given the fact that the Prime Minister is currently standing at the very location where the conflict had happened, what is the significance and what is the kind of messaging that is really put across to the rest of the world?
Yeah, Purva, ever since the Galwan clash happened, it kind of marked a tectonic shift in the way India deals with China in many ways. We were more assertive, we were more forthright. India proactively started taking, action in terms of the business coupling that we have between Indian industry and Chinese industries as well. And we saw a series of measures. Now with the Prime Minister himself going there and interacting with the troops there, the Air Force, the Army, as well as the ITBP jawans who've been posted at the border, as well as standing at the very point where, in the vicinity of conflict had happened, it's a very strong and a very decisive assertion of India's rights, of India's beliefs, and the fact that the Chinese army transgressed and violated every single agreement that they had made with the authorities. No better or no stronger message could have been sent. Remember, India is a democracy, and for a democratically elected Prime Minister to stand at a place like that tells you and tells the army as well that the entire country and the entire citizens of this country are with the army. I mean, the army, yes, people always say that this is, it's something which boosts the morale of the army. I mean, the Indian army, frankly, always has a system and a structure where the morale never really is a problem. But a salutary step like this certainly goes a long way in making a very significant political point, as well as a very strong international message across that something like this will always have the backing of the Indian government from the highest level downwards. It's not just that it's something which will happen at the back door, at the backroom level or backroom talks. This is something that we will do overtly, and we are very decisive about this as well, Apurva.
All right, Vinay, I'd request you to stay with us at this point. Let me also bring in Maruf Raza, who's a strategic affairs expert who's joining us on the broadcast. Mr. Raza, many thanks for speaking to us and good afternoon to you. We're looking at very unprecedented show of solidarity there coming in from the Prime Minister at a time. We're looking at the talks that are also underway in trying to de-escalate the situation at the border. How do you see this in the light of all of these developments and the kind of messaging that really puts across to the rest of the world?
You see, let me draw parallels with earlier border incidents, or it's not a full-fledged conflict, so therefore I'm going to call it border incidents, which we've had with the Chinese to start with. I mean, between 2013 and now, there have been at least 3 or more major showdowns with the Chinese on the LAC. The LAC, as those of us who know, is the line that is held by Indian and Chinese troops along the eastern part of Ladakh, where Chinese lay claims on territory which should have been Indian territory if you go by the terms of post-independence structuring of the Union of India. And it is the first time, therefore, the Prime Minister has gone to the Ladakh front, and at a time when the conflict situation is far from settled. He's obviously been via Ladakh to Siachen a couple of times, but this is the first time he's getting a military commander's briefing of the operational situation that exists on the east of Ladakh. Ladakh has enormous strategic advantages for India and for China and Pakistan, and therefore the Chinese moves have taken place here. Firstly, Ladakh is the place from where the Indus River flows and from where you get your access into the Siachen Glacier. Both are strategically very, very important for India in terms of the water resources they hold, in terms of the defense of all of what was the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. The second most important thing that the Prime Minister has achieved with this visit is to himself get a perspective about the threat that exists on the ground, how the military man looks at it. You see, getting a briefing in Delhi, you often get very filtered versions. The military gives its briefing, the bureaucracy moves in, the national security apparatus moves in, the foreign office moves in, and what should have been an undiluted version of what the Chinese agenda is, what he gets is the convoluted version of everyone's point of view when he gets briefed in the PMO. So the briefing here is of utmost importance to understand that east of Ladakh, the Chinese threat is not going away. North of Ladakh is what Chinese want to get access to the Chakskam Valley, which they have held on since 1963. And in between lies the wedge called Siachen Glacier, which Pakistan and China both want India to exceed, so that they can have a free run from the Karakoram Pass to the Chakskam Valley. China now has to do a very, very jumpy road and a bad road condition move of 1,800 kilometers, which takes several days for them to link up with Chakskam Valley, which is crucial for their water agenda, both to melt glaciers and to make microchips. Third and most important thing that the Prime Minister will now realize, that gone are the days where you could talk the Chinese out of doing a conflict with India. This is a sad legacy of Krishna Menon, who often used to boast that we don't need armed forces to defend us against China. We will talk them out of it and out-debate them in the UN. None of that happened, and the disaster of 62 did happen. Third and fourth equally connected points are the fact that you cannot concentrate most of your resources only on Pakistan. Your resources have to be divided now, where Pakistan is getting 70% of your attention and China perhaps 30%. It now have to become 50-50. China has achieved one aim of getting Pakistan involved in this equation, but our armed forces are not ill-prepared. The Northern Command, which is virtually forever at war, at least for the last 30 years, is facing Pakistan on the LOC, China on the LAC, the militants in the valley, and a whole lot of other distractions all over the place, from media to politicians. So the Northern Command is a very, very crucial place for the Prime Minister to understand the vast number of engagements and how they are still short of the equipment and the wherewithal to actually achieve their fullest potential. Don't for a minute discount the fighting ability of our men in uniform. In 62, they lost because the politicians didn't let them fight. And if this time the politicians want them to fight, they have to very quickly make good the army's crucial military equipment requirement. There have been announcements made now, but please understand, this is not going to come to our arsenal for at least another month. And when it comes, who knows what changes will take place on the ground. So we have to be prepared, in General Malik's words, who was the army chief in Kargil, to say we don't have much, but we'll fight with what we have.
All right, Mr. Raza, also an important aspect here to consider is that the Prime Minister is going to have a day-long itinerary, and in that itinerary it is also said that he's going to be addressing the jawans there. How significant do you think that is, considering the fact that on one side you have the talks of de-escalation that is taking place, on the other side there are also talks about boosting the morale of the jawan as well. So while the Prime Minister there goes on to address the jawans there, how significant do you think that would be?
It's very significant. Believe me, it was an old military adage that you can have a whole bunch of lions, but led by a sheep, and they won't fight. And if you have tigers led by a lion, they will fight like tigers. So it's very important for them to understand that the political leadership understands the constraints under which they operate. They will fully support them, and they have a free hand tactically. Now, please understand, tactically is a very important word for military men. That means all that is on the ground, they stand on the turf, they have to battle in, they have a free hand, and believe me, they all understand the ground as well as they understand their own body in the darkness. Every nook and corner is known to them, so leave them on their own training and leave them under their commanders, and they'll deliver. What they also, there's another term in the military that goes a long way. It's called langar gap, which means the cookhouse gossip will be how the Prime Minister's message will travel to every man in the furthest trench. When he speaks to these people who would have been duly selected from all units, 1s and 2s and 5s and 10s, they will take the message back. So you don't need internet there. You need the right commanders to listen and go back and tell the people that we have a leadership that is understood our problems and is willing to give us all the support, because people are not going to defend that desolate piece of land if the politicians abandon them. We had that situation in Sri Lanka. We sent our men to Sri Lanka to fight a war that the country forgot or wanted to forget. And we had more casualties in Sri Lanka than we had in Bangladesh. But even now, the people in this country are not very sure why so many braves went there and died fighting somebody else's battle in another land. This is our land. This is our battle. And believe me, our men are not going to get them a further inch inside. And it's good for the Prime Minister to have gone there, because it will give a greater clarity to him about what is Indian territory and what Chinese are holding.
All right.